and since this is all about doctoral socialization, no pressure or anything, but.
Oh, no pressure. Yeah, yes.
No, not at all.
Okay, and I'm recording now.
Excellent, good to know.
And we have about, I would say, 30 more seconds. So we're going to see if anyone is going to join us in the last 30 seconds. And otherwise, we'll get started. Okay. All right, well, let's get started. And I may have to mute, I think it was Catherine?
Kathy,
was that?
yeah.
I'm not sure whether. Okay, so I'll mute.
And Kathy, if you need to say something, just type in the box and we'll unmute you, okay?
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Doesn't seem to be, I don't seem to have the mute control.
I got it.
I may not be. Okay, thanks. Okay, so thanks for joining us this evening for our third meeting of our doctoral socialization series. Dr. Wickersham and I feel really strongly that part of this process of getting your doctorate completed involves getting to know each other as professionals and getting to know us as professionals, because it's a rite of passage. And so our hope is that these meetings help facilitate a little bit of that engagement and interaction that you may not be getting in an online environment. And so based on your feedback, many of you wanted a session that was just focused on problem statements. And Drs. Buckley and Delicath have been kind enough to join us this evening as part of the kind of prerequisite or kind of request of attending today's meeting. I did ask many of you to watch, or in some cases hopefully rewatch, the wonderful webinar that was presented by Drs. Buckley and Drs. Delicath on problem statements. I know that I have given it to all of my candidates and have recommended it extremely highly, because it not only covers why the problem statement is so important, but actually walks you through the funnel or upside down pyramid and why it's so important to have both a broad and specific problem and the evidence to back it up. And so what we're going to do today in our time together is actually spend some time looking over problem statements that some of you have sent in, and you'll have the opportunity to get feedback, and also we'd like you to have the opportunity to provide each other feedback. So we don't want to give the impression that we are the only ones that have something important to say about your problem statements. In fact, I'm confident that all of you can contribute something meaningful, and that sometimes seeing somebody else's problem statement or work can offer a fresh perspective on the topic. So I encourage you all to do that. Before we get started, though, just a few kind of basics, and then we're going to spend, again, most of our time on problem statements. You've heard this before, the funnel approach or the funnel metaphor. And so just, as a reminder, in terms of a very basic template or formatting, we really, encourage you to conceptualize your problem statement in terms of both a very broad problem per your study, but one that eventually tapers into a specific problem that you can address within the context of your dissertation, and that fits in and is consistent with both your field and the type of degree. In the middle, so to speak, of course, is where you not only create the logical links between your broad statement to your specific statement, but where you provide scholarly support and evidence for why this problem is indeed a problem. Why does it matter? A few things based on the problem statement. And I want to make sure that I think I skipped something. Oops. So one of the things that we ask you to bear in mind when you think about a problem statement is that you, again, should result in a focused problem that leads to a specific research response. And that's important as well, because after all, problems, however we define them per our discipline and interest, can have a variety of responses. They're not necessarily problems that can be addressed by collecting data and doing research. And so one of the things that you also have to keep in mind when you present a focused problem is whether or not you can address it in a dissertation and whether or not it's a problem that can lead to a research response. For the applied programs, we ask that your problem be identified as a practical problem or issue, and certainly for the PhD, we talk about the issue of theoretical significance or contributing to general knowledge. Now, one of the reasons that so much time is spent on the problem and why I would say at least some of you may have gotten frustrated with kind of the seemingly endless revisions, although they're not endless, is because the problem statement is the foundation of your entire study. So if that's not set, and if it's not clear, and if it's not justified, then the rest of the study, like dominoes, kind of falling dominoes, falls apart. And so therefore, when we look at the problem statement and the development of that problem statement, it must also align with your purpose, research questions, and your method and design. So not only must you identify a problem that's substantiated, that's clear, that actually leads to a research response within the context of your dissertation, you also, or we also assess whether or not the purpose that you've stated, your research questions, and the method and design can actually address the precise problem that you've identified. Very, very also critical, of course, is scholarly justification. And scholarly justification from contemporary scholarly sources. So if, for example, 20 years ago, there was a topic and many researchers called for further research to address a particular issue or topic or problem, unless for some reason there's been a 20-year kind of hiatus, it's unlikely that there hasn't been movement. And so that's why we really emphasize the kind of last 5 years up and into including the contemporary literature within the last year, because you want to make sure that what you're contributing is actually novel, that it's new. The dissertation, again, asks you to contribute information or knowledge that's new, either practical knowledge that's new or theoretical knowledge that's new. It's also important to understand that a gap in the literature is not inherently problematic. In other words, many things aren't studied, right? There are lots of things that never, ever, get explored or studied. And that in and of itself is not a reason for a dissertation. It's the start, but it's not the end, right, in terms of your rationale. So that's why you will often hear us asking, well, so what? Why does it matter? Why is this gap important? What do we hope to gain? Who do we think is going to be able to use this information, and why? What are the negative consequences of this particular problem, and why do we think that knowledge or data can possibly contribute to this solution? So any questions on the basics of the problem statement before we actually start looking at some of your examples? Okay, then I will take that silence as a resounding "we are ready." So we are ready. Okay. So here are a few problem statements that were sent by Sunday evening. And for those of you on the phone, we may also have some examples that were compiled last month. So please speak up if that's the case. But for now, we have at least 3 that were submitted that we can get started with. And I'm going to turn the reins over to Dr. Wickersham.
Oh, to me? Okay.
Oh, just to...
Well, let's have Drs. Buckley and Delacath take a look at John Gasparini's problem statement. and make some comments on it.
Okay.
And I will actually make this a little bit smaller so that, is that too small or can you all still see?
No, that's fine. I actually have another copy of it with some of the comments that I was looking at earlier. So inherently, when I look at a problem statement, at least with my mentees and the students that I've worked with, overall, this has a lot of good elements to start with. So it has a lot of good foundation to work from. So the student's work, obviously I don't know this individual, but there's definitely evidence that the student has really explored what he or she wants to do. So I want to start off by emphasizing that. So good job at least to start off where you're coming from. A couple things that I hope as all of you are following along, you're noting that kind of stand out right away. First of all, you want to make sure that whenever you're citing any kind of statement that is not commonly known, you absolutely need to support it with a source. And the very first sentence would be a good example of that. What makes it challenging sometimes is that if we're very close to a topic or very knowledgeable about a field, sometimes we forget that it's not commonly known. So we might throw out information or statements that we do have to find a citation to support it because it isn't something that all of your readers will know about. Tim, you want to jump in, or you want me to keep going and you just shut me up when you're ready?
I'll just add right quick. I mean, just right after that, something that I do not like personally, but I also think it's very confusing and not maybe the best way to do it. The third sentence, I mean, you should have cited, as Dr. Buckley was saying, but the third sentence, then you start just to say a majority of research, and then you list like, I don't know how many are there, 10, 1, 2, 7. I mean, it's better to cite specific ones and not do these generalistic statements about, oh, a lot of literature says this, and then do this kind of catch-all thing. I prefer not to do that with citations, but it's kind of off the subject a little bit. But be careful in citing 7 or 8 different things for one sentence. It's very confusing and sometimes not the best way to do it. But I'll jump into the general. I mean, I like the flow of what you said, Robin, and then he does the general problem. In a more general sense, when you read this whole paragraph, it flows okay, but I don't know exactly what you're doing in this one. Is my question. If I just read it read it and thought, okay, what's going on? I kind of got an idea, but I'm not sure if I know exactly what you want to study yet, just from this one paragraph right here. I'm just looking at the first paragraph.
I absolutely agree. I had the same thought that there's a lot of concepts and a lot of almost technical terminology throughout this whole first paragraph. And essentially, I think the conundrum of writing a dissertation is that you want it to be scholarly. I mean, you're writing at a doctoral level, but you also need to write it so that anybody from any field can understand it. And I often say to my students, if a 5th grader can read your dissertation, then you're doing well, because you want it to be, at least, maybe that might be a little low, but you want it to be understandable to anyone who is reading it. So you have to keep that in mind, that you don't want to be so wordy or so immersed in your field specific language that anybody just can't pick it up and read it and understand it. The other thing to remember is that when it comes to, and I actually saw, I think, the same issue with all 3 of the examples that we got over the weekend, whether it's the general problem, specific problem, or both. You ultimately have to have a general and a specific problem that is abundantly clear why we should care about that problem. So it can't be a problem that you're alluding to. It can't be something that people within your field might see as a problem. It has to be something that when a reader sees it, they're like, oh, absolutely, we have to fix that problem. I usually tell my mentees, it has to hit you in the gut. So regardless of what your background is, like, no, that's definitely a problem that needs to be fixed. With the general problem, I didn't get that. I still was left feeling, well, okay, but why should we care? Why does this need to be studied? And the same was true with the specific problem, that the author tells, or the writer tells me that it's necessary to be studied, but it can't be based on the researcher's opinion. It has to be based on other literature or other research that's been done to support the general and the specific problems.
I agree. Another general statement, the second one, I was kind of looking at the second one, the second problem, and then many, I see this, it's not just these three, but so often I see people like in the middle, it says some schools have attempted to address the problem, that in the problem statement you try to give us an answer to the problem, or you try to address some issue that, well, we should do this about the problem, and then you start talking about a little bit more of the purpose, and then you start talking about the study in the problem statement, and I find that to be, again, as Robin was saying, you kind of then start to dilute the problem by talking about the purpose, and then here's a solution, and here's maybe what we could do. The problem statement in its section should just talk about the problem, have literature, as Dr. Buckley was saying, literature to support that problem, and literature to back up why it should be studied or something. But so often we get kind of ahead of ourselves in the problem area and start talking about the rest of the study. And really it's just about the problem. And then be clear, concise, focused, and stop writing and move on to the purpose statement, or the purpose section. But just talk about the problem and then stop writing is what I tell people, stop writing.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
If you could go back to the original one, that's the one that I wrote. So what my question is really that, I am doing a neuropsychological investigation. Best case, I'll be using an fMRI. Worst case, I'm going to be using an EEG. There's a certain nomenclature to neuroscience that you really are not going to have the average, person possibly going to understand. But that being said, mind you, you're seeing this without the introduction, which explains a lot of these things that you pointed out as maybe being a problem. So, I just kind of wonder about that, because I don't remember if it was your webinar that I saw with both of you, although I've read your book. A lot of this does get kind of filled in when you read the introduction, so I wonder if that wouldn't change the way you might look at this.
John, that's a really, really good question, and I think that there's a couple ways to consider it. First and foremost, you are absolutely right that the pieces of the dissertation help, lend support to all the others. The flip side of that is I try and remind the students I work with that not everyone is going to read your dissertation from title page all the way through the references. For most of us, the way we read dissertations or research studies is we go to whichever section we're currently trying to do in our own research. So for example, when I'm collecting research or for a literature review, I tend to go to chapter 2 in a dissertation or that relevant section in an article. I tend to have a habit of starting with the abstract and then going right to somebody's singing to us. I start with the abstract and then I tend to go right to methodology to see what the study's all about. So when we consider it from that perspective, I think that my personal belief is that the pieces of chapter 1, or the pieces of the concept paper at this point need to be somewhat self-explanatory on their own. So if someone just picks up your dissertation in the future and reads the problem statement, they'll get enough of a sense of your study that they don't necessarily need the intro. Now, when it's all together, ideally, if that's enough for them to say, oh yeah, that's kind of similar to the problem I'm considering, then they might read the whole thing. The other thing is that while I absolutely understand that there are some very field-specific topics, and I'll give you an example. One of my mentees right now, and I have no military background whatsoever, he's a pretty high-ranking jet fighter pilot for the Navy, I believe it is. Yeah, the Navy. And his study, when he first gave me his concept paper, it was very similar to yours, where I had to go back to him and say, Roger, you need to explain this to me because I don't get half of what you're saying. And that was his biggest struggle, was writing it for a civilian. So I guess we were a really good match, because every time I'd send it back to him saying, I still don't get it, I still feel stupid, and he would refine it to the point where when I read it now, and when a city members get it, who are fresh eyes and didn't have a background, it really is at that point where at least his begin, he's at the manuscript stage. So his chapter 1 is very easy to understand, even without a military background. Now, once you get into his literature review, it is a very dense, very field-specific literature review. And I think that's okay, because I think that's where you flesh it out. But to me, if I were working with you, that's kind of the direction I'd say. I'd say, okay, I get what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. But at the beginning, we kind of need to ease people into it, lead them into it, so at least they get a sense of what you're doing. And then you can get, really dense into some of the terminology and the concepts and that sort of thing. But again, that's my opinion, and other chairs might have different ideas about that.
No, it's great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, John, I felt kind of the same way when I first read your problem. I got down toward the specific. I thought, well, this is like a medical school's report almost to some extent. And I was like, I have no idea what some of those words mean actually. So I would have probably said the same thing. If you were me, I'd say the same thing. Can you write this in a more simpler text?
I've actually
You can use some of the same words, but just make it
made
more
all those
simply.
words up to impress everyone.
I always tell, I have students who try to write, well, I have students that try to write like you, but the words they use are wrong. But what in their head, they think a dissertation has to be this unreadable thing, that, the words have to be big and the sentences have to be long. And I usually say, hey, look, you can write you can write the most simple sentences and the most simple structure and words, and it makes just the same amount of sense as long as you write it really well. So that's what I tell them. Just write it well, and it's fine.
I really take to heart what you're saying. You can ask Dr. Micah. The very first problem statement I wrote, I was actually trying to win a Nobel Prize with my problem statement. It was really trim this down quite a bit. So we're making great progress here.
That's great.
Good.
Yes, I would concur with that. Really coming along great.
Some more questions, or
Do we want to go down to the
talk?
next,
I guess.
to the next
Yeah, we
one?
can go down to the second one.
Yeah.
The second one is, let's see, I think it's.
Is this Alicia?
Yes.
Yeah.
And is Alicia with us tonight?
There's an Alicia on the call. I'm not sure if this is Alicia Boston or not.
Okay. And that must be Alicia. One of the things that I heard in terms of initial feedback was that there was kind of this shifting back and forth between problem and purpose.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I started that off. Yeah, because I think if you read the thing about the second paragraph, tends to look like more about the purpose. Not exactly, but that's how it's starting to sound all of a sudden. And I'm still not exactly sure. Again, kind of different than the last one. I'm not really sure what her problem is again, because in the first one she talked about the general problem is about everything. It's all those IEs. Okay, what are you looking at? And then the specific then is stated in a way that's I'm not exactly clear again. Who or what the problem's for or about. That's my issue, is just a lack of clarity, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Be specific, and very simple and specific.
There were two things that I noted about this one that kind of stood out to me. So I'll go with the one that is more PC to talk about first. One is that when I'm looking at the specific problem, and it says will address that the problem the study will address is the concern the targeted school. And from those words, immediately I kind of sat back and said, okay, this almost sounds like an action research project that is really just looking at one school and one issue within this one school. And to me, for a doctoral dissertation, you need something that's going to be very generalizable. And I automatically, from just that sentence, I got the sense that this was going to be just one small little picture around one school. And that is nothing that I would ever agree would be an okay reason for to use or situation to use for a dissertation. If there was something completely unique, a very specific case study that made it so exceptional or unique, that might be different, but I'm not getting that sense from at least what we're reading here. The other issue, which is a little bit harder to talk about with students, and I'm always nervous talking about it in a group, but there are problems out there. Well, it's not even a problem. There are topics out there that are unjust, unfair, nobody likes. So I'll pick a safe one, at least for me, because I fit into that the sample or the population I'm going to talk about. It stinks that there is still the glass ceiling for women. It stinks. It's not fair. I don't like it. I don't like it for my daughters, any of that. But it's not a problem. It's not a problem that we have the glass ceiling. You have to explain why what problems are created that we have the glass ceiling, that women still earn less than men. Why is that a problem? Yeah, it stinks. It's not fair. But what are the problems that are created from that? And when I read this general problem statement, that's kind of the same feeling I got, that it's not fair that we have this achievement gap. But what are the problems that are created for the populations identified who have this achievement gap? What problems are created for them or in our society because of the achievement gap? So please ask questions if that's not clear. And please don't get me wrong, I don't like the achievement gap, I don't like the glass ceiling, but those aren't necessarily problems. They're just issues that then create problems, and it's those problems that have to be the focus of a study.
I think what you're getting at, Robin, is the focus should be on the negative consequences.
Exactly.
So it's not just that something exists that's unjust, but what stems from that.
Exactly.
Why does it become a social or economic problem?
Right.
How does it impact us?
Yep. Exactly.
Or the population? Got it.
I like to use the example of the glass ceiling because if you present, let's say you a female researcher was doing a study on the glass ceiling and walked into a stereotypical all men, all white, middle-aged organization. Why would they care about a study about the glass ceiling? They may not, and the majority of them probably wouldn't. If you identify a problem that comes from the glass ceiling, then they might buy in and say, oh yeah, you got to fix that. Yeah, okay, glass ceiling, but we want to know more about the problem. We want to know how you're going to fix that problem. So you kind of have to look at it like that. How do you make your readers, whoever they may be, see that it's really a problem and say, yes, that has to be fixed?
Right. And another way to say, Robin, is kind of like this a little bit, but I see it in the thing. I always say people want to feed the hungry of the world. Well, that's an issue, but you can't do anything with it. You can't study that. You can't find a way to strategize that, because sometimes they're too big. So when you just say, I know there's lots of topics we could talk about that are way too big. I mean, the glass ceiling might be too big, really. So what's the issue you want to talk about underneath that topic? Saying feed the hungry of the world idea. What is it that you could specifically look at, an issue that you can look at, study it, and come up with a recommendation?
Good.
And that ties back to what we noted in the beginning, which is that there are a variety of issues and problems, but whether or not they can actually be addressed by research, and specifically by research contained in the context of one dissertation, is another issue as well to bear in mind. So you have to pick something that you can actually address with your data in the context of one study.
Absolutely, and if anybody on the call tonight took the time to listen to the webinar that Dr. Delcath and I were part of, one of the big points we made is you save the world with your dissertation, and you shouldn't. Your dissertation is a means to an end, and not just the end to getting the initials after your name. It's training you to look at situations, look at problems, and come up with a critical analysis of how to address them. So this is all part of your training and changing how you look at the world and how you address problems. So keep that in mind with your dissertation, that you don't want to take on something so big that you're losing out on actually the process of training yourself and getting it done. So then you can go off and feed the hungry or do whatever, big, gigantic projects you might want to do with your research abilities at that point.
Alicia, if you're on the phone, if you have any questions about your problem statement that you'd like to raise, we welcome, for that. If you don't want to, that's okay as well, but we want to give you the opportunity.
And thank you to the 3 students that were so willing to be vulnerable and put your work out there for us. I really appreciated that.
Okay, are we ready to get to the third one then? Okay. So the third one is by Nina Cunningham.
Actually, this one had I had a similar statement about going back to that. There are issues that are unfair or unjust, but what are the negative ramifications? What are the negative consequences of those unfair, unjust situations or issues? And that's what kind of came out, that, yep, it stinks that there's an underrepresented minority within the U.S. STEM programs, but why is that a problem? And I'd want that to be the focus.
So more on the negative consequences and what it means for society.
Right.
Yeah, I think this one needs some, I'll say focus. I mean, just when I started reading this one, the very first sentence is, it has like 3 different things it's saying, and they're kind of related, but not necessarily, and they all could have an issue related to them that would be a different issue. So I'm almost thinking, okay, what is this going to be about? There's 3 different things, 4 different ways it could go, and then as Robin said, I still think it also is a specific problem. I didn't see the problem again. There's a lack of understanding of this issue, but what's the problem the study is going to try to address then? I don't see it in that, even the specific problem.
And remember, which I think was brought up right at the beginning of our session, that a lack of understanding or a lack of research, it almost never flies for a doctoral dissertation. I think I had one student a couple years ago truly demonstrate to me why that worked, but it's really few and far between that'll actually be okay. But I do want to emphasize, with all 3 of our examples tonight, these are demonstrating, some incredibly hard work, great start to, thinking through where you want to go with your doctoral research. So please, take this feedback as just an opportunity to go back to your chairs and say, this is what I heard about it, what are your thoughts? It really is just to help get you to, further along in this process, not to demoralize you by any means.
I think Robin, I think you and I brought this up the first meeting, or even in the session that you can listen to. I think sometimes students, the writing, you see the amount of writing that's here for this problem statement. I think the writing gets in the way sometimes. I sometimes, or most of the time, I'll probably say every time now, I make the student go back and just write, here's just one sentence of the general. Just the general problem is this, the specific problem is this. Just 2 sentences, that's it. I don't want anything else. I just want to see those 2. It makes them really focus versus, well, I got to put this in here about this helps and this is why and these citations and this thing. And I think the writing gets in the way of their thinking, or sometimes the student wants to change their idea as they write the paragraph because they want to add more. that gets into the I want to do more. I want to feed the hungry of the world by the time they get done with the 2 paragraphs. When they really started off with a really great general problem and something that was specific, focused, and easy to do. So I, a lot of times, just tell them, go back and give me 2 sentences. Don't give me all this stuff. Just 2 straight, simple sentences. And then we can, it makes them really think about it, I think, sometimes. Back to, I think, something you said, Robin. We really want them to critically think about what they want to do. Not just write, but really critically think about it and come up with that really, I think some of these have great ideas in them, and I think we just got to get that idea to come out in the sentences.
Nina, I'm not sure if you're with us. If you have any specific questions, I want to give you the opportunity as well. And if you don't have any specific questions, that's fine too. But I do want to give you the opportunity.
Comment box from Nina saying she's here.
What?
I saw a little comment bubble come up saying that she's here. Box.
Oh.
Oh yeah, Nina. Yes, I'm here. Yeah. Maybe she can't. Maybe she doesn't have voice. Maybe.
It's showing that she needs to. There, she unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm here. I was on the phone the first half. Sorry. Actually, the consequences in that first sentence, I was actually putting everything after that comma is a consequence of the problem, which is minorities leaving the pipeline. So what you're saying I should not have those consequences in that first statement?
No, my question would be, why is it a problem that minorities are leaving the pipeline?
Okay, and then my question to that is, isn't that what the rest of the problem statement, as you're citing what has been studied, what we know, what we don't know, and all of that, isn't that what's building the argument as to why it should be studied?
I read this because actually this is an area of interest for me, and when I read it the third time, there wasn't a logical flow, so I still wasn't taking that away, and that's one of the challenges throughout your whole dissertation process, is that it can be very clear in your own head, especially as you get to know your topic more, as you get deeper into it, but it has to be clear to whoever's reading it. So if that's your thought, I think this needs, you need to play with it more and refine it more. I think a lot of times it helps to visually chart it out so you can see how each point connects to the other, because right now, to me, being a first-time reader, there's a whole lot of information that kind of seems very randomly connected or very disjointed.
And Nina, I think the problem statement should state the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the paragraph supports it, but the problem has to be clearly stated in that. So the general problem is increasing rate, but then it has to have an issue that is researchable in that sentence, not just then after this I'm going to finish it off. It should state the issue in that sentence. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I got it.
And then this is for not just the 3 authors, but for everybody in the line. Keep in mind simple things that are often overlooked in your focus on writing. You will check and double check and triple check for punctuation, APA errors. Make sure when you use acronyms you explain them first. And again, I tend to be annoying about this with my mentees in the concept paper. I have them every time it's a new section and they're going to use the acronym again, they explain it again first, because again, kind of I think it was John, our first student, you don't want them having to go back in your paper to search for what an acronym stands for. As they get into their DP, maybe they only have to explain their acronym every 10 pages or whatever it is, but in their CP I have them re-explain every acronym, just write it out and then in parentheses. give the acronym, and then they can use it freely in whatever section they're in. So keep that in mind. Make sure you don't use abbreviations anywhere in your dissertation. No contractions, no abbreviations. So there's and no colloquialisms. So no phrases that are known in your field or are known in America, because you might have some international people reading it. And for example, pipeline might not be understood by everybody all over the world. So you have to keep in mind you want it to be really understood by whoever's reading it. And your chairs love it when you hand them drafts with no punctuation, no grammar errors, no typos. We just eat that stuff up. So.
The other thing, Robin, I would add to that is try to stay away from adjectives that bring bias into the study. A lot of times you'll say it's a tremendously high attrition rate. Well,
yep.
That tremendously is just an interjection that it tends to bring bias because it tends to focus a thought then. Oh, wait, tremendous, that's a bad thing. So be careful of that. Now, unless you're quoting somebody, if you're in direct quotes, then you use whatever words the direct quote would have in it. But as you write, be careful. I see a lot of students who want to stress something. So in their writing, they start to use these adjectives. And after a while, you can see a pattern of the adjectives. And then it doesn't bother me so much as a chair, but if I'm going to read this as a person outside who's going to use this as information, you're going to start to see the biasness of the words and go, well, this study really isn't worth anything. So that's why it's important not to do that, because it has to be scholarly, use literature as the basis only, and then write it as truthfully and without yourself in it as much as you can. Not that anyone did that, that's some advice. Yeah.
Any other questions? I believe we have Kathy is on the line, and I believe, Kathy, that you shared with us last month your problem statement, and we may have it in this compilation. Would you like us to? Okay, so I will scroll down and see, Kathy, if it's here, and then we could. Here we go. So why don't I make this perhaps a little bit easier for us to? Whoops, I just made it harder, not easier.
Yeah, and I just lost the screen. I can't get back to it. Let me try. Oh.
Can you see it?
I can.
Okay. Okay. So, Kathy, we're not sure. You may have done some revisions or completed some revisions since you first put this, or since you first submitted this, but nevertheless.
Robin, I'm going to let you read that in a minute. I'm just going to state, not for you, Kathy, but this is for anyone or everyone in this room that's listening. Try to not use the word it. I'm down toward the end. It says it is important. It is in the intent. I would say I don't allow any of my mentees to use the word it anywhere in the dissertation. Because it doesn't mean anything. It's a meaningless word. I have no context or meaning of what it is. So it's just an interesting word that means absolutely nothing. So go ahead, Robin. I'll let you go next after I get that little pet peeve of mine out of my system. Yeah, the word it.
It's always good to get on that soapbox for a little while.
Yeah, what can I say?
What I would say is that, and Kathy, again, thank you for offering this as an example, because you very well might have already done some work on this. But as an example, the first sentence is very long, and I get incredibly lost by the time I get to the end of it. It's just the way it's organized. It's very disjointed to read. If you look at the beginning, despite the benefits associated with service learning into curriculum and courses, one significant problem identified, which justifies the need for this study, is that and then it just keeps going on and on. So you again, I know it's a lot to try and put into your problem statement, but you want readers to see the general problem, get it, move on to the specific problem, get it. There's nothing, there's no citation from research or literature to support this first sentence, which appears to be well, it's identified as a problem. It's not really identified as either the general or the specific. So I do like in the next sentence, even though we can only see the first two lines, I like that there's a percentage there. And as trivial as that might seem, percentages and numbers, if you can find them and if they're applicable to your problem, are such a really clear-cut way of saying, here's the problem, and I have a number that says it's a problem. People really kind of respond to that, and it helps to clearly communicate what a problem might be. So if you can find one and it works, certainly go ahead and use those.
I was kind of looking over the whole thing, and I like the words "the general problem is" and "the specific problem is" as part of the sentence, because I don't really know which is general, which is specific in your paragraph here. I may not be seeing it, but I don't see anywhere where it says. I think the first sentence is your general problem, I think, is what you're saying, but I don't see where it says the specific problem is.
Yeah, I think, and I understand what you're saying, that is the general problem is, you know, that despite the fact that this is the great teaching methodology, it's seldom infused into curriculum and courses in higher education. Be more specific as you read further down, and I probably, maybe I should have said more specifically, it applies to the field of aging and the lack of service learning courses and its impact on recruiting students into the field.
Okay. So you're going from the general problem being that this great strategy isn't being used, and your specific problem is in regards to aging and service learning. Is that what I heard?
In the field of health and human services, service learning has specifically been shown to increase student interest in the field, and without you know, higher education institutions utilizing service learning, students don't have the opportunity to benefit from its exposure.
This is a hard one for me. I love being able to read a problem statement over like 3 or 4 times, but what I would say initially is that it almost sounds like your problem statement is more like a specific problem, but the fact that we're not using a strategy, even if it's been shown to be a good strategy, again, isn't necessarily a problem. Again, I'd move you back to what are the problems created by not using that strategy, and I think you're saying that somehow it's not helping these students in the human services field.
Yes,
So
that's one specific problem. You know, other problems with service learning, which I went into in other areas, but not specifically in the problem, is the fact that, you know, students who don't benefit from this teaching methodology suffer from, you know, student success, universities struggle with retention. You know, there's numerous problems that are associated without the use of this high-impact practice in curriculum and courses within higher education institutions.
So what I would say, and I'm sorry, I lost where your name is. Whoever we're
That's
speaking.
okay, it's Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. What I would say, Kathy, and again, having read this just for the first time when it popped up on the screen just now, my initial impression is that the problem statement, as it is on the screen, is very wordy, and your intents get lost within the words and the length of the sentences. And so what I would say if you were working with me is that I'd actually bring you back to the method, a similar method of what Dr. Delacath had suggested is, just tell me what your general problem is, show me the source that supports it. Tell me what your specific problem is, show me the source that supports it. And then we're going to make sure those two are connected in creating that funnel approach where it's a big umbrella problem and you're looking at it from this one aspect of the specific problem. From there, those two sentences, both supported with a citation or multiple citations if applicable, then I would have you flesh it out from that point. And just listening to you, even just for this little snippet, my guess is this is a field you are very familiar with or have lots of experience with, or that you have a great passion for. And so I think that, again, my guess is that you have so much knowledge base or research that you've read about this, and it's all starting to trickle out into this problem statement, and then it kind of bogs it down.
You're pretty much on target. Yes, I have years of experience in the field, and in fact, direct a large service learning program for a large university, and have been involved in numerous research studies, but I'm looking at it from one particular area as it applies to the field of health and human services more specifically because of the need for students in the field of gerontology and aging services.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think that's back to something that Dr. Buckley said. Be careful how narrow you make it in the end, because then it becomes an action research project. Like you get too narrow, and then it can't be broadened back out by the end. I don't think you're doing that, but be careful of that, because you can get it so narrow that it becomes then, quote unquote, it looks almost like an action research project, which is kind of looking at a very small segment of something, very narrow segment, and then it's hard to generalize that back out in the end. So just be careful of that. But I can see where you're going, but I understand that it's just kind of hard to see in here, Kathy.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy. Did we cut you off?
No, I was just saying thank you for your feedback.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. I believe Alicia Cooper, or Ashley Cooper, I'm sorry, is on the phone, and she submitted her problem statement later. So maybe we can review hers as kind of our last problem statement. Ashley, are you amenable to that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So again, Doctors Delacath and Buckley are seeing this for the first time, and we understand that. But we're going to get some just general impressions based on what we have here.
Okay, so the general problem is a good start. Again, I'd say, okay, so why is it so what if these kids are, if these are traditional, these kids are entering college in large numbers, but the graduation rates have, and I'm not exactly sure what languished mean. I mean, I know what the word means, but does that mean they've decreased, that the kids are taking longer than the expected 4 years? Like a number, percentages, numbers would definitely help. Although you say in the second sentence, 42% of its population is its population. So I'm not even sure about the percentage there. So it says 42% of the population is completing post-secondary degrees. So is that 42% of the whole United States, or the portion of students who enter the colleges? So I'm just a little confused just from the first two sentences in terms of what the exact focus is, and then, you know, from a devil's advocate, why should I care that these kids are not graduating from college? Like, how does that affect me as a member of society?
And then you said this decline in numbers. I don't know what I mean, you just use one number, 42%. So what does that mean? From declined from what? So just clarity of what you mean by that decline.
And by the end, for the specific problem, we're talking about community colleges, and there's a big difference between community colleges and traditional four-year colleges. So you can't lump those. Those are two very distinct populations. Unless there are some community colleges that are four-year, but the traditional community college model is still two-year. So be careful about blending those two populations. And
I find your sentence interesting. In general, the precise problem is. Because when I first read it, I thought, is this the general problem? It's weird how you start out with the word general and precise. It's kind of a, I call that an oxymoron almost. But.
And then again, it seems like you're going to focus it in Texas, but why? Why look at just Texas? Is there something so unique going on that we all should know about it? Or is there something in Texas that's representative of what's happening in other places, and therefore Texas is just somewhat of a convenient sample? But be clear why you're picking. I have a lot of students who name their home state. It's easy to collect the information, but you better be able to explain why more than, well, it's easy for me to drive to, you know, those colleges or those organizations. It has to be, excuse me, it has to be an issue that's either widespread, and okay, Texas represents that widespread problem, or there's something so unique going on in Texas that people should have a heads up about it. But I think clarifying that general problem would help a lot, and then some of the points that we've said would help make that specific problem. I like the word specific rather than precise a little bit clearer.
And then the sentence right before that, large numbers of high school students pursuing a higher education degree lack academic readiness skills to pass placement to avoid remediation. So when I read that sentence, I think that adds to my confusion as to what the problem is. Is the problem the graduation rate, or is the problem all the remediation courses they have to take because they're not ready to go to college? So I think that's starting to add a little bit of confusion to me when I read that sentence there. Maybe your problem isn't even graduation rates; it's they're not ready to go to college or something along that. I don't know. I need a little more clarity.
We may have time for one more. Stephanie, Stephanie, if I can scroll to Stephanie's.
Well, we're looking for other cities. So,
All right.
right from the start, I don't know what PLC means, so I'm already lost. And this kind of goes back to that earlier point I had, that I really do like students in the concept paper. Every section, they're going to write it out, and then you know, put the acronym in parentheses, and then they can use the acronym freely through that section. And by section, I mean the problems, the intro, the problem statement would be each a separate section. The purpose would be a separate section. it feels redundant, but you kind of have to do that in your dissertation. Repetitive, everything you learned in high school and college about being creative and flowery in your writing, you got to toss it out the window. You need to be repetitive and be explicit in everything you're trying to communicate in your dissertation. So to me, PLC isn't, PLC means a couple different things in my world, so I want that clarified.
Yes, I wrote that down when you said it. Yeah, that got me.
And then the other interesting thing is, I know PLC is just what it is, but I don't know how to say this. When you glance at a paragraph that has PLC written 10 times in it or 15 times in it, does it look odd to you, or is it just me? I'm not sure. Because PLC shows up like 15 times in those first 4 sentences, I think. So it's kind of weird when you look at that. Even though you may know what the acronym is, but it's just odd to see it that many times repeated.
Maybe, and then I think that's a good example of chair preference or reader preference.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me, but it's good to know how it's received by other people.
Well, I was staying away from the word it.
I love you already. I love you already. That's great. Yeah.
Nicely done.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That's a humor very important in this whole process.
Absolutely. And gosh, a student who's absolutely listening to everything.
Yes.
So what does PLC mean?
It's a professional learning community, primarily of teachers.
Do you have any specific questions, Stephanie, that you'd like to pose?
No, I have done some work on this since it was
Okay.
originally sent to you, but I'm certainly going to go back and clean up the PLC and the acronyms. Thank you for your help on that.
Eva, would you
Where's the
bring it
specific
down a little bit
problem?
farther?
Yeah, where's the specific problem in here, Stephanie?
Well, it may be in the newer version. The specific problem is how PLC activities actually impact student achievement and teachers' classroom management.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Great research question, but it's not the problem.
That's more of a purpose than a research question, but
I heard a how, but
Yeah. Quite frankly, my brain has shut down after dealing with high school kids, and I don't have my copy open in front of me.
it's okay. And a lot of times, again, it's good to take questions from your chair, or your committee members, and process and think about it. It's not nice something on the spot to respond to, so just something to think about.
So, and we encourage all of you, thank you so much. Further? Leah, you wanted me to scroll down further? Okay. We want to just reiterate the fact that that one, it was brave to certainly show us your examples,
Yep.
and two, that we completely understand that some of what you're hearing you may have questions about. So please reach out to us. We expect that, even if it wasn't your particular problem statement that received comments, there may have been comments that other people received that make you wonder about your own work. Or if you're not clear about exactly what, if anything, you should modify, please reach out to your chair. We're very happy to kind of process that with you, but we thought we'd give you at least the opportunity to give you the feedback of two other individuals. So we thank you so much, Dr. Delacath and Buckley. It was wonderful that you gave us your time this evening, and I don't know if anyone has any final comments or questions. Our next meeting will be on December 7th, topic to be announced, but certainly let us know if you have anything that you specifically would like to get feedback on.
I'm going to put out one plug, if you don't mind, Eva. You've all at least heard out
Please do.
our webinar on the problem statements, and it seems like it was worthwhile to have a follow-up meeting here, so that's wonderful. There are some coming up. Dr. Remedios is doing one on life after the dissertation. What do you do with your research once you've finished your oral exam and now you need, a publication on your resume. So that's a great one to consider. One of the ones that I'm really excited about, if it actually happens, is I'm trying to organize one where we're taking very successful doctoral students. So, for example, one of the students I'm going to ask is a student who walked into his very first DIS class with me, and he had an almost complete concept paper. Now, some students do that and they think it's a concept paper, but his was actually an almost complete concept paper. I've never had that happen. And so we're going to take students like that throughout the whole process, the CP, the DP, the DM, oral exams, and graduates, put them on a panel and a webinar and have them share some of their best tips for you guys. So you're hearing it from peers.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm not sure. It should be within the next 3 months. And Eva, I'll let you know so you can share with the group. But that's what I'm really excited about. Dr. Delacath and I used to do that a lot when we worked for a different university, and it was a very, very successful program. So if that happens, I'll let you know.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Buckley. Thank you, Dr. Delacath, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Delacath and Dr. Buckley.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.